Hi, everyone. See a lot of people joining in. We're just going to give it a minute while more people join us before we start. Wow, the numbers are going up. This is very weird and exciting.
It's hit 5 viewers.
Oh, now it's 6. Excellent.
Is my mum on yet?
Hi, everyone. I think I'm going to kick off. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to the last of the BFI Network live shorted out sessions in partnership with BAFTA. My name is Bogutskaya. I'm a film programmer, podcaster, and writer, and I'm super chuffed to be closing the series with a Q&A with writer-director Ben Wheatley. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. BFI Network, Encounters Film Festival, and Watershed have launched Shorted Out, calling for people to get creative in 90 seconds or less while staying at home. The lovely Alex from BFI Network will be sharing further details on this in the chat thread throughout the whole of this discussion and can answer any questions that you may have, and we'll be sharing links, so make sure to keep an eye on that. The session itself will last about an hour. I'll start off with a conversation with Ben, but we will make sure to leave some good chunk of time at the end for your questions. So start thinking about good ones and ask away throughout the whole of the session in the Q&A box, not the chat box, and I will get to them in the last 15-20 minutes of the session. So without further ado, our guest today is writer-director Ben Wheatley, the filmmaker behind such beloved independent films like Down Terrace, Kill List, Sightseers, A Field in England, High Rise, Free Fire, Happy New Year, Colin Bursted, as well as many short films, collaborations, ad campaigns, and TV series. And I'm a huge, massive fan, and I'm super proud of being hosting this. And Ben is also currently working on the upcoming adaptation of Rebecca and working on the action film Tomb Raider 2. Ben, thank you so much again for joining us and giving up some of your time to chat about your career so far and your approach to filmmaking. And to kick things off a little bit, can you tell us how you've been spending this time?
Initially I've been panicking. I spent a week kind of slightly hysterical and worrying about food. And then once that calmed down, then I kind of started writing, really. And I think that in a way for me, it's been useful to kind of just have the time to slow down a bit and stop. So, you know, and I hesitate to say that anything good has come out of all of this, because I know that lots of people have been having a really horrible, miserable time, you know, but from that end of it, it has been useful, you know. So I've sat and kind of I haven't watched many films, to be honest, which has been it's not what I expected. I thought I was going to be watching loads of stuff and kind of like, well, hey, I sucked back all that media that I've been missing and watched loads of TV, and I just haven't. I just felt like profoundly depressed, to be honest. And then I'm not really that keen. So I ended up writing a lot because I thought I could escape into that, and so that's been basically it. So yeah, that's been me, and walking the dog.
That's really good. And
so that's a whole lot. Yeah.
You kind of tap into something that I feel like there's been a lot of pressure on filmmakers and on writers in particular of using this time to write and to develop projects, to kick them off. And can you talk us a little bit through about how you usually start a project? You know, what does that look like for you?
Often it's just like a tiny, you know, I have an idea and a concept, and then I'll write it. I kind of developed a kind of process for writing, which I'd nicked from Sid Field. I got that Sid Field workbook, the second one, not the first one, right? Mm-hmm. And that's quite a good book, because he says, if you use this book, you'll come away with a script. Mm-hmm. And that's useful, but I can save you the £8 for buying it by telling you what it says, which is quite straightforward. And it's like, have something interesting happen every 7 pages, every 7 minutes. So I'm like, oh, that's quite a good tip. That's good. So what I ended up doing out of that is I developed a process where I'd write like 1 to 30 on 3 different bits of paper, and that was like the 3-act structure. And then if you could write a thing for each minute that happened, then that was all right, you know. And that way you can then blast through ideas and see if they've got legs or not. And if you can't fill out the 30 points, then you just bin it, you know. And so you can jump around a lot if you do it like that. And so that's kind of how I usually start. But I've usually got like a haiku version of the film, which has got the ending and the middle and and high concept thing of what it's going to be. So I always kind of know where I'm going, and then I just start writing really and see what it is. And then usually I get a first draft out quite quick, and then it's just a horrible mess. And then and then on the stuff I write on my own, it usually then goes to Amy Jump.
Mm-hmm.
She has a look at it and she'll go, no, or she'll go, you should go, you've ripped that off my script, or this is awful, or I'll have a look at this. And then she might rewrite it or totally rewrite it. So it's like that's kind of the lifespan of the scripts. And then or I'll just finish it off. Mm-hmm. So it kind of bounces backwards and forwards between us.
Yeah. And do you usually focus on one project and you kind of focus on that one until you get it finished or right or ready to put out to market and kind of start the production process? Or do you have several things on the go?
No, many 10, 12 scripts usually. And then what I do is I'll put them in a drawer, which isn't a drawer anymore. It's just a hard drive somewhere, and I'll find them later. So they kind of percolate, or they kind of like distill for a bit. And then when you reread them, you go, oh yeah, all right, that's all right. Or, oh no, that was always terrible. And then sometimes they go, oh, and then the other thing is we have the system of mistress projects. So you have a main project, then when you're trying to bunk off that one, you start the mistress project. But then that one can have a mistress as well, and then and soon enough you're just jumping from project to project because you can't face writing the one you're supposed to. And then as the guilt gets higher and higher and higher, then you come back to the one you're supposed to be writing, and then you do a bit of work on that. So that's kind of that's what I end up with lots and lots of scripts. And so I was looking on my computer the other day and going, I don't even remember writing this one, and there's like 40 pages. I'm like, brilliant. Okay, well I'll have a look at it. This is like from probably about 4 years ago, and I'll play around with it and see if it will run or not. And then if I get stuck, then I'll stick it back in the drawer and pick up another one and start going. But sometimes I just do them for my own entertainment. Like, if I've written scripts before which are basically fan fiction, which will be like on licensed stuff which I'll never get to do, but I'll just do it just because I want to do it. So in a way, it's like the cheapest version of making a movie and seeing a movie in your head,
And how often do you dip into this drawer of ideas? Like, do you kind of go into it almost every day, or combine ideas, or have finished scripts?
It depends on what end of part of the process you're in with a feature. So if I'm in a pre-production on a movie, then I'm unlikely to be writing, and that'll all slow down. But once I'm in post again, I start writing again. So, and then if there's a gap between projects, then there's a lot of writing happens. And then that's when if there's not another project coming in, that's when I'll be writing something to then do with Rook Films, which is the production company I have with Amy and Andy Stark.
And kind of I mentioned at the beginning, kind of outside of the feature films that we all know and love, you've also worked across short films and have collaborated in anthology features and done quite successful advertising films as well.
Quite successful, not very though.
Very.
No, quite successful. Borderline successful, kind of not very successful,
I think Cannes Lions Award, there, it's very successful.
Oh, but when you dig into that, that's actually for an online thing. It doesn't count. It's only a small.
But I wanted to ask you, kind of, how has working across all of those different spaces that are all filmmaking, but for different audiences, different mediums, using kind of with different rules to a degree, how have they all informed your process of how you're working now?
Well, they're all very different, and they're almost completely different, and it's hard to take rules from one to the other. And mainly it's to do with the hierarchy of where you stand as a director. So in an independent, self-financed or financed by your own company feature, you're at the top. On an advert, you're kind of quite way down the line when you've got like the client and the ad agency, and then you kind of, unless you're like a really powerful ad director, then you're a bit slightly higher up, but normally you're right at the bottom. The on TV, you're, depending on what the show is, most likely you're below the producer, writer, and star. So you're kind of in a middling area where you've got, and then on a like a more of a studio feature, you're kind of in between. So you have moments when you have control, and then moments when you don't have control. So they're all very different, and you have to, and the thing I found is like it's like you've got to learn to read that structure as fast as possible and know where you are in it. Otherwise, and also try and go into it with your eyes open, knowing where you need to pick your battles. Otherwise, I can't take the attitude that I have when I make Field in England to Rebecca, because it's a totally different situation, basically.
That's interesting. And could you talk a little bit about kind of how there's a lovely extensive bookshelf behind you, and I find it interesting as well to kind of think about your films in terms of other.
Honest, it's mainly comics though.
That's actually exactly going to be my question. Kind of, how do you look at other forms of media, visual media like graphic novels and comic books and novels and video games, and how do you kind of incorporate them into your films?
Well, it's just, I think it's all influence, isn't it? It's like stuff. I've played video games since I was like 6, and then I've read comics since I was 6. So, it's part of my makeup as much as cinema is. So I don't really, and in the same way that I don't differentiate between high and low culture in terms of art movie to action movie, I like both, and I will go and see tentpole cinema releases at the same time as watching, kind of Eastern European art movies from the 60s. I like both. So yeah, and I found that, like with comics, certainly from reading 2000 AD and stuff, it was an entry level into counterculture and into science fiction concepts, which I'd only realised later might have been slightly secondhand, or they've been working through at the time. So yeah, and I think it's part of, in a way, it's part of the empathy of trying to find an audience, is by understanding the stuff that we're all looking at, because we don't, only if you're like a really blinkered kind of super genre specific super fan, do you only consume one type of media. We all kind of consume across a broad spectrum of media, and only really kind of in critical circles do you get these demarcations where they get broken up. In real life, you're consuming the whole thing the whole time. So I always think about television. It's like when well, back in the day when we used to watch broadcast television, you could look at it as individual programs, but really it was just this splurge of information, which you would get a science fiction drama that would run in, then 30 seconds later you'd be watching a soap opera, 30 seconds later you'd be watching the news, and then a cartoon. So how does what is that stream like when you actually look at it as a chunk? It's very odd, to have taken in all those different types of things. But that's the thing that forms us, and so using it back in your work, you hope that that's part of the connection back to the audience.
And I read in an interview that you gave that you actually used Minecraft to map out Free Fire. Yeah. And I was wondering kind of how kind of does that look like, and kind of what did it bring to the making of that film in particular?
Well, why I did it like that was because I needed to share a 3D space with all the people and that film is particularly about space. So we all need to be able to talk about the same thing, but I can't, as much as I tried, I can't operate 3D. I tried to learn 3D Max about 10 years ago, and I wanted to try to kill myself. It was so complicated. And so ended up, but I do play Minecraft, and I really enjoy Minecraft. And I thought, well, you know what? I can make a Minecraft space, and then we can all log into it and all talk and walk around in it. So we kind of did a like virtual recce of the space using the game engine. But subsequently to that, I've been looking at Grand Theft Auto as well. There's amazing cinematic tools you can use with that, and in general machinima stuff, which has become a lot easier to kind of make moving storyboards with. It's a little bit indulgent, you know what I mean? You can waste quite a lot of time pissing about in games pretending to work, but it is useful. And certainly I did a thing with my son a while back where we made a massive big action sequence in Grand Theft Auto, and then put all the cameras all over the place, and it was really good. We looked and went, wow, I'd like to see this as a film. So it's kind of the, apart from a pencil, which is the cheapest way of working out what stuff looks like, this certainly Grand Theft Auto allows you to do action stuff, which would be, because it's so perspective based and stuff, would be very hard to draw.
No, I mean, I love it because it's, as an idea, it's just using the tools that you know really well and the worlds that you know really well to serve and to build a project. And
Yeah, I'd use Minecraft again, I think, if I had the time. It's just quite laborious to do. So I think in the end, one of Andy Stark's sons had to build the thing. So I built it. I built it in I kind of wireframed it out the space, and we used like this. You could get like a Blade Runner texture pack, so we used that as well. So it was a bit more moody. And then uh, and then he had to build it. He filled the walls in for us. So that took, you know, this is a job that you give to a 15-year-old.
yeah.
So it's brutal, but you know, exploitation, the worst kind, you know.
And that kind of ties in, segues neatly into a question that I wanted to ask you about. Kind of one of the things that constantly comes up in these types of talks and interviews is kind of the idea of building your crew and the people you surround yourself with, that you'll collaborate with. And you've built a really close-knit group of collaborators that you work with very often. You know, your partner, screenwriter and editor, Amy Jump, and Laurie Rose, the cinematographer, and actors like Michael Smiley and Ian Maskell. And, you know, wanted to ask you kind of how, not how you build those collaborations, but what does a good collaboration look like to you?
It's people that, I mean, I think there's kind of 2 or 3 kind of nodes which I've initially drawn from. One of them was basically Down Terrace, the first film we made. Laurie and I didn't know each other that well. I knew Bobby Entwistle a bit, who was the sound guy, but I didn't really know anyone on it. I knew some of the actors. Obviously, I knew Rob Hill very well. He was a very old friend. But when I watch back when I was editing Down Terrace with Rob, and looking at the footage that Laurie had shot, I started to understand what the job he'd done, you know, and how amazing that stuff was, and intuitive it was. And then why, you know, once you recognise that people are good, then why would you risk changing it up in a way? So people come and go a bit backwards and forwards, but generally it's people that are really, really good, but also you can get on with really well. And a lot of it's about creating an atmosphere on set as much as anything. So that's why, you know, someone like Bobby Entwistle, you know, that having a really super skilled but also super friendly sound team and a super friendly camera crew makes the actors feel a lot more relaxed. And once you've got relaxed actors, they're much more likely to go all the way for you, you know, as opposed to standing in front of a load of kind of people who are just getting a paycheck and a bit cross, you know, looking at their watches and going, oh, this isn't very good. Oh God, is this what we've got to do? Which you can have quite easily, you know. So and we're all good friends as well. But the other thing was that we all came up together. So we all started from kind of quite low down, and then worked, and the films became more complex. And we've all been kind of in the trenches together when things have gone wrong. So we know, you know, you look over and you see people that you've been in really extreme situations with, you know, in terms of work, not, you know, it's filmmaking. It's not like digging a hole or, you know, working in a hospital, but it can be a bit intense, you know. So that stuff that's quite important. And those bonds mean that, but also, you know, how far people will go, how far they can be pushed, or how far they'll go, you know, how they'll act in certain situations, which generally with everybody is completely right to the edge and they're completely calm, you know. I'm the only one who's like slightly fractures, but most of them, interestingly, you know, a lot of the guys on the crew are ex Top Gear people. So anything I throw at them is nothing compared to the misery that they've experienced on Top Gear.
Yeah, I think that's a top tip for anyone looking to build a hardened crew.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's nothing that you know, we're up a mountain somewhere. They're like, we've been up loads of mountains. It's not a problem, you know.
Can you perhaps kind of share a kind of an extreme filmmaking situation perhaps that you worked through together as the team?
Well, I mean, when we shot Sightseers, this is a mistake of like people taking scripts too literally. Like that, it said in the script it was described as oh God, what was it? It was a horrible lonely place or something like that, or an extreme upper mountain somewhere. So when the locations people went out, they found somewhere that was up a mountain, like properly up a mountain. So the bit when they burned the caravan and stuff at the end was, and the only way up was in jeeps, 4x4s, and it was really, really dangerous, and it could have been shot anywhere. The views were good, but they weren't good enough, you know, to risk all that. And there was all sorts of trouble. And in the end, at the end of it, well, basically we got up there and we could see in the distance this like haziness, and we went, what's that? And then it came in, and it was like this hailstorm, and we had no shelter or anything. So it came through, and it stung. It was like really, like we were all standing going, oh God, oh God. And then, and that happened every 15 minutes.
Oh my God.
9 hours, you know, and we're like, oh man, really? And there was no toilets or anything up there. And I remember going out and having a pee, and just the wind grabbing the piss and just swirling it around me like this, going, oh, really? Really? And then by the end of it, and then Nick Gillespie, who was the second unit cameraman, broke his leg on that as well. Right at the end, just fell over and tried to save the camera like a, you know, like a hero, and then snapped his leg. So we were like, oh, and I'd never had anyone hurt themselves on the job up until that point, and it was really horrible, you know. So that was extreme, and everyone had this kind of glazed look afterwards. And so there was like a base camp at the bottom, and then the mountain. Yeah. So when we came back down to the rest of the production, everyone looked like they'd aged about 10 years, you know. It was just horrific.
I mean, that really bonds a crew, doesn't it?
Yeah. Probably could have done without that, though, to be honest.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about your work with Laurie Rose, who's worked, if I'm not mistaken, in all of your films so far. And there's a bit that you mentioned when you were talking about High Rise, about working with him and almost treating him like an actor in a way. And I found that really interesting. And I wanted to see if you could elaborate a bit on your process, especially since you've, you know, evolved together and worked in projects of growing intensity and scale. How has your relationship with him evolved?
Well, I mean, the idea of treating actors like cameramen like actors had come from doing viral online stuff initially. So we'd have all this stuff where we were having to do fake camcorder footage, but then you'd get cameramen and they'd be really good, or camera people, and they'd come in and they'd operate the camera in this way, but it looked professional. And we started to realize that there's a methodology to working a camera that a normal person has that a camera person doesn't. And they do it in a different way. And what you have to do is to make stuff look realistic, you have to say to the camera operator, you've been doing, because when you used to film with a camcorder, it was like that, strapped in your hand, and you're at an event, you'd be filming like this for like 40 minutes and your hand gets really lazy, and then that affects how you shoot stuff. But they're not like this, like a you know, a professional camera person. So you have to then brief the camera person and go, please perform in this way, not against your own instincts. So that was the beginning of it. And I started to realize, well, yeah, that's a character, isn't it? And you saw it when I saw it on jobs where other camera operators would come in and then they'd suddenly have a completely different feel, certainly for handheld. And then from seeing Laurie operate on Down Terrace, I realised that his kind of probing eye was very sensitive and interesting. The way he looked through the camera was interesting, you know. And we spent time like kind of looking at Grey Gardens and the Maisels documentaries in terms of how to make stuff that's handheld that isn't like which just happened is that kind of aggressive fly on the wall handheld, which is like or fake handheld, which is like in The Office, which is all this kind of jittery zooming in and out stuff, which is relatively new, really. It's not really what handheld used to look like. You know, handheld used to be like a camera shot that would just drift off somewhere looking at stuff, and they'd splice a load of sound together from some other shot, and then it would come back into sync, which is much more relaxing. Anyway, so that's kind of where it come from. And then I realized, and certainly working with Laurie on the hand, because you know, our films are kind of split into handheld films and then kind of gripped films, and the handheld ones, yeah, it was just more about kind of making sure that, and talking to Laurie about having the empathy of the characters and how you looked, you know. And often I'd say, you know, in the early days we do things like there was a thing called Dealer's Choice, which was I'd block the characters, and then I'd go dealer's choice, and he'd just shoot whatever he wanted, just pivoting around, looking at stuff. And then I'd do a coverage one way, coverage the other way, and then maybe a shot that followed one person, and then that would be it, you know. But coming from an editing background, I always kind of knew that it would all cut. And that's, you know, in a way, sometimes you just don't want to get in the way of the creative people, you know. So it's, you know, telling, if I break Laurie down and tell him what to do specifically, then I don't get the good bit of him. I just get like a version of myself, which is not necessarily what I want. Sometimes it is, but not always, you know.
Interesting. And you've mentioned your kind of the DIY and the DIY roots and the approach. And I was wondering, kind of, as your projects have grown in scale and you know, just the sheer amount of actors, the sheer amount of sets, you know, and with Rebecca and Tomb Raider 2 as well upcoming, how do you keep that? It's not the right word, but I'm sure you get what I mean. Kind of this handheld DIY approach to your process.
It depends. I mean, some of it is about the rawness of performance, you know, and like handheld gives you that when you don't know, and it's taking the control out of the audience, that they can't predict what's going to happen, and then it makes everything feel more immediate, just on a kind of basic level. And being open to that kind of rawness is interesting. You see it in the Scorsese stuff, does it? Jumps backwards and forwards between that style, because I think him and Thelma Schoonmaker come from a documentary background, so his structures, his kind of working method is like half documentary, half kind of neorealism, and then half kind of classic Hollywood. So then it just jumps backwards and forwards, and that works to kind of arrest the audience. So you suddenly go, fuck, it's real. Why does it feel so intense and real? Oh, it's because there's something, that there's another eye that's watching it, that's which is the camera eye, you know. And so I think that's pretty important, you know. So I've lost my thread there. I was off talking about Scorsese, and oh yes.
I think we all do that. We'll do that at least once in a day. Just start dreaming about Scorsese.
I haven't even had a drink yet. What's going on? So.
I wanted to touch as well on well, High Rise and Rebecca in particular are obviously based on incredibly acclaimed and heavyweight books as well.
Yeah.
But you know, have no shortage of ideas and scripts in your drawer and stuff that you've made as well, and with other screenwriters. Had you considered or tried to option books before High Rise, or was that something that kind of seemed out of reach, or something that you always wanted to do? Or
yeah, that was something. It was a period that we started looking at books. Definitely, we went from and there's a few things that have developed over time. Like one is like putting licensed music into films and being able to pay for it, which is brilliant when you can do that. And the other thing was, looking at books and going, oh, I wonder if anyone's got this book. And I would do it, you know, I'd phone up my agent and go, has anyone got so-and-so book? And they go, oh no, it's owned by X and Y. And on High Rise, it was just, I think it was because my agent sat 2 desks down from Jeremy Thomas's son, who's an agent. I think that's what it was. And anyway, I got, you know, from looking at it on the shelf to having the meeting with Jeremy Thomas, who's the producer who owned the rights to the book, was 2 days. So it was really super quick. And that was just like on a whim. And I think I had other projects I was working on at that point. And then suddenly High Rise became a thing. And it's like, everyone went, oh my God, that's a good idea. Why don't we do it? But I mean, in terms of like I don't know. I mean, they are quite scary, obviously, doing those books. And High Rise was particularly scary because it's got such a heavy fandom and a super sharp, smart fandom as well, you know. And we kind of just had to, you know, knuckle down and do it. And then I only really started to get afraid when we were about to release it and go, oh Christ, you know. But if I'd have thought about it while we were making it, I would have been paralyzed, I think. And it's the same with Rebecca as well. You just have, specifically because it's the hit, you know, it's a massive Oscar-winning Hitchcock movie, and only it's a really crazy thing to remake Hitchcock to a degree. But it was always for me more a kind of an adaptation of the book.
And when you're, you know, with these two experiences now, and kind of in general, when you're looking at a book or, you know, whatever that may be, I mean, people might want to adapt a comic book or a graphic novel, or a video game. Kind of, how do you break down that process? You know, you've got the rights, you're working on it. Kind of, how do you take something that's already existing in another medium and translate it into a script? What does your process look like with that?
Well, I mean, for High Rise, you'd have to talk to Amy about that because I didn't write the script.
Yeah, no, I know.
And I went nowhere near it, you know. And in a way, what happened was she took it away, and then 6 weeks later, a script turned up, and that was it. And then we made that script. It barely changed. So that was entirely her struggle, which I watched from. Like, oh my god, that doesn't look like much fun. But I think, and again with Rebecca, I didn't write that either. So,
yeah.
But from, I think, projecting myself into what they might feel. I think I think what it is that that you've got to work within the structure of the medium that you're in. So, like a book, I think is like the author's the book is like a dark room, isn't it? And the author goes in with a torch, and they show you like a bit of the room, and then another bit of the room, and another bit of a room. But with cinema, the room is lit up bright, and you walk in, you see everything at once. And a lot of the tricks that the author can use by not showing you stuff all are screwed in cinema. So you've got to watch out for that. And then also the way that the dramatic structure of a book is completely different, because you've got your experience of consuming it is over such a long period of time and in fits and starts. But the film is like, here we are, and I've got to grab your attention. I've got to Sid Field you every 7 minutes and keep you looking at this thing, and then have an ending, you know. So it's a very different medium, and I think that's where books and comics and games all get bent out of shape as they're slotted into that thing, you know. So but yeah, I mean, that's usually the main challenges, I think, is trying to bend the, I mean, for instance, Rebecca is like, it's all in her head, you know.
Yeah.
You know, how does that even work, really? And you'll find out, you know. But it's
and kind of one of the things I was curious about, and I think it might be especially interesting to budding filmmakers. Once your projects go on scale, and there's more people involved, you know, more people giving you notes and opinions and have presence and stake in the films, kind of, what do you think are the most important voices in the room for a filmmaker? You know, what are the relationships that you think they need to prioritize and cultivate?
I think it's a sliding scale, and it depends what the situation is, and it's different every time. I mean, the way that the scripts have been written and the films have been developed that I've made are all totally different each time. So it's very hard to get a kind of a purchase on it, and I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes in generally in the creative process, because you just don't, you have to work it out, you know, as it goes along. I mean, I think on the films I've made, which I've produced or been involved in the production company, it's a lot clearer because there's a lot less people. So, you know, and certainly for something like Colin Bursted, where I edited it and wrote it and directed it. So, I mean, I just sat in the room and I was, all right, yeah, it's done. Boom. And it's like, there's, you know, and there's no test screenings or anything like that. Well, on Rebecca, we did tests, which is the first time I've done it. We tested Free Fire, I think. But we never acted on the results of it. But on Rebecca, we tested it a few times and went backwards and forwards. And I thought, you know, coming from an indie background, I thought that might be a bit uncomfortable, but I found it quite useful, you know, in the end. And it's good to see, you know, where people fall in and out of the movie. Though, in a way, the other thing is that all movies you fall in and out of. There is no perfect film or very few, or a Paper Moon maybe, but there's not very many movies that you can watch which you don't sometimes go, even your favourite films, you know, well, this is a bit slow. What's going to happen here? Or like often, you know, that you see the criticism. It's like, oh, I knew what was going to happen in the end. Yeah, you probably did. You know, that's not necessarily a criticism of the movie. You know?
And do you have kind of any advice on both dealing with notes and edits, and, you know, not instructions, but with notes from people who you work with, but also in giving out those notes and those edits to people you collaborate with?
Yeah, well, I've changed over time, you know, and I changed with each film. And like I was was quite hard work at the beginning. I think I was, you know, in terms of not doing anything, making a point of not doing it. And it's kind of, and I think in a way, because of Down Terrace being a film that we entirely financed and made ourselves and then put out ourselves, and went and sold it and got distribution in the UK and the States with it. It's a different route than going through the kind of short film application route, which is quite arduous in terms of like explaining yourself to people. And that's kind of why I never did it, because I didn't want to have to do that, you know, which is a particular arrogance, I know, but but in the end, it's like, you know, we thought we knew what we were doing, and we kind of did, but we're also prepared to bin the film if it was terrible. So, you know, so after that we were quite heavily guarded against notes and fought tooth and nail, you know, not to do anything as much as possible. But over time it's changed, you know. So I think, and I think that's probably from doing television as well, where I've kind of gone, if you're not entirely responsible for everything, then really it's a group responsibility, and so your voice is slightly less in that fight, you know. But I think, but also I go backwards and forwards between different types, you know. So, you know, after I did Strange Angel in the States, which is a CBS show, which I'm, you know, coming as a gun for hire director. I really love doing that. That's brilliant, you know. And the writers, there's a team of writers, and there's all sorts of people on set looking at thing and feeding back to you, going, oh, this isn't working, that's not working, and you kind of completely collaborate with them. And then go and do Colin Bursted, which is completely on my head. The whole thing I was responsible for that. I was like, that's good too, you know. So I think you just have to learn where to take your pleasures, and these types of production aren't the same, and so sometimes you just can't take that position from production to production to production, unless you want to have a really cross and difficult life, which I think, but some you read about it, and people are like that, you know. They are just they just fight it out from project to project. But I just, you know, I think if you want to work, if you want to have complete control, there's ways of having it, but not in every project, you know.
And before I open up for questions in a few minutes, kind of, I wanted to ask a couple more. Does a film or project ever feel truly finished?
Yes, often. Yeah, often. Yeah. I mean, I've certainly on the features I've made, I've always felt really happy with them, and I've always, you know, mostly I've had final cut as well. So they're just. And they tell you that when they're done, they just go, I'm finished. Go, stop now, please stop. You know, please put me out. I'm done. So I know that I've read that about people saying that. Yeah. And I've never felt it. And I must say that also the idea of low budget to high budget is somehow high budget being easier and better. I'm a big fan of low budget and micro budget, and I love doing that stuff. I mean, I'm going to do one, I think, in July. You know, and I think that the lower the budget, in a way, you should have more control. It's almost like a, you know, that it's more like you know, your acoustic set, and then you go on and then you do the bigger one, which you've got more responsibility, so that you do that in a different way.
And with all of these different hats that you've worn, you know, as a producer, as a writer, as a director, as a gun for hire, working across different mediums, kind of, when all that is said and done, kind of, which part of the filmmaking process would you say you enjoy the most?
I don't know. It depends. It just, again, it's a total non-answer, because it really changes all the time. You know, at the beginning of it, I found shooting I was very anxious on the floor, and found I used to get this like whistling in my ears of like being in a lift that's dropping down a lift shaft. Oh, wow. I was terrified, going, fucking hell, the time's going. We haven't shot the staff. Oh God, is it any good? And over time, that went away. And I would have said then that the editing was the best bit, because I was an editor. But now I really like shooting, and I like being on set, and I don't mind this pressure of it, because I know it's going to be okay, you know, usually. And certainly from coming from a background of making stuff, shooting stuff in 8 days, and I always know I can go and make a film like that if I want to, you know. And with the money that, I think with the budget on Down Terrace was £6,000, but even that was more, we didn't have to spend that much. If we'd been smarter, we could have done it for a lot less. And so it's like, you kind of go, well, I could always just go back to do that. So it feels less terrifying now than it did.
I think that's a good moment to move on to audience questions, and there's a whole bunch, so I'm gonna try to ask as many as possible. So as a writer director, do you think it's best to make your first feature having made a short, or instead continue to making shorts to develop your voice before writing or directing a feature?
I think that you need to do what, oh God, such non-answers. You need to do what you're comfortable with, right? So I was 36, I think, before I did Down Terrace. And I shot all sorts of stuff, and like shot adverts and but I then felt confident I could make a film. But the developing of the voice thing, I don't know. I think it's more like a technical thing of like, do you know what all the jobs are that are involved in making the film and what it is? Because I know when I started, I knew nothing. I knew less than nothing. And it took me, and that's why it took so long to get anywhere with it, because I was so naive, you know. And I think once you find out all those bits, then why wait, you know? And the other thing, I always thought that, like, it depends what the budget is of your short. But if you're anywhere near 10 grand, then what are you doing? You should make a film, a feature. You know, but doing one for like 20 quid or 30 quid on your phone, that's a really good idea. And I'm using my phone more and more now, like a sketch pad, and I film a lot of stuff, and like wherever I see stuff, and I cut it all on iMovie and then edit it to music and look at it and stuff. And I use that kind of thing as practice. But I think that the Down Terrace was the thing that showed us that, you know, really, if you're going to spend 8 days doing something, you might as well make a feature film, because it's going to, if it's good, then it's going to help you a lot more than a short film will. Sorry, short film fans.
I'd love to hear about how you developed scripts in the past. Can you give us an insight into how you pitch, or if you pitch?
Yeah, the pitching, I've done all sorts of pitching. I've done the classic Barton Fink Hollywood style pitching of going around studios, which is just terrifying beyond all reckoning, you know. And they just shove you in the door, and you go bah, 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 and then they go, yeah, that's great. And then you go out the door and they go, no, terrible. They don't want to do it. And then you do like 8 or 9 of those in a day. Go back to the hotel and go, oh my God, what am I doing? And then by the you on that kind of thing, you go out on a 8-day trip, and then just do every place, and then at the end of it they'll go, maybe these people will develop the script, and then off you go, or no one wants to know. I've done trips before where I've gone out and done interviews for jobs, and as I'm leaving the room, I'm getting a text from the agent saying, you've not got the job.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it's really brutal.
Brutal.
I thought that went all right. No, you're dead. Go bury yourself. You know. So it's, but other stuff has been more like, I think Field in England was more like Amy wrote the script, and then we were going to make it, you know, and we had some money, and we were going to do it like Down Terrace, and then Film 4 went, oh, are you making something? We were like, maybe, and then they kind of got involved after that. So it can go, which is a very particular set of circumstances. I know, probably not that useful for anybody, but I think there's definitely an argument for, if you have momentum, if you're making something, then people will be more interested in getting involved than if you're just sitting there going, can I have some dough, please, to make my dream come true? Because they probably won't give you it. And I've done that. I had 10 years of that as well, you know, of like walking around Soho being cross and going, why are these people making films? They don't deserve it. I don't like any of the stuff that they're doing. And it took and it was such an epiphany when, and I've been into meetings with production companies and gone, well, just go and make something then, if you're so clever, just go and do it. And I was like, no, you should pay for it. And it took a long time to learn that. Probably should go and just do it, you know, and see what happens.
Thank you. Another question is, do you think there's potential for the UK film industry to shift to try more genre films that don't require American co-productions?
I don't know. I mean, I think that the problem that we've got in the UK is that the cinemas themselves, there's not enough of them to support a kind of mid-range local filmmaking, into local focus stuff. So that's the problem. That's why there isn't loads of films being made about that are specifically UK based that the genre may be. I mean, I heard a thing with it, like from one of the distribution companies in America, and they said, oh, he'll do all right when he makes a film in a language people can understand. So I was like, oh, does that mean American? And people watching like Kill List with subtitles on and all this kind of carry on, you know. So that's the problem is like, but I think that genre in itself. I think, well, look, the whole industry can be born out of one movie. You know, I think like a lot of the art house indie stuff comes from Eraserhead, effectively, and how well that performed in midnight screenings and had an audience, and it built and built and built over time, and then eventually it becomes the repertory cinema favorite, and then films start to cluster around it. That and kind of, you know, and I think that if you make that genre movie that's just so amazing, then people will go and see it, and then an audience will build from it. It's even also like when Reservoir Dogs came out and then it got banned, and then it was, you know, I think people forget it was like on every weekend for a year, you know, in repertory cinemas, and it was the only place we could go, and it was a thing, you know, it's a cultural thing. So I think it can happen, but it's not going to happen from the distribution side. It will have to happen grassroots, in the same way that Evil Dead was made. You know, if you've got, you know, what would the Sam Raimi of now be doing? That's the question I'm interested in. What would he/she be making? You know, what is that film, and what would it even look like? You know, and where would people see it?
Thank you. And another question is, how often do you doubt your own director's decision, both off and on set, and how do you solve that?
I was going to say I don't doubt it, and then I thought, no, actually, shit, that's an absolute lie. I think I think moment to moment I'm pretty confident, but I know on Colin Burst, because I was writing and directing it, I was drinking myself unconscious every night with terror, you know, because it was just, I couldn't even see. I was looking at the paper, looking at the scripts and going, I don't even know what's written on this. This just, it was a kind of almost like an hysterical dyslexia, you know, which I get as well. You know, I can't tell my left from my right, all sorts of stuff. So I was like going, oh God, does it make sense? But then I was editing it in the evenings, and I was going, oh, it does make sense. It's good. So I was saved by the me of like 3 months ago. Luckily, that guy did write an all right script, but I was panicking when I got there and didn't know. And also because I was dealing with so many people, you know, it was all a bit scary. But usually it's all right. And because now, and I think mainly because I edit as I go along, so I don't have that gap between shooting and then going, oh, let's see what it's like, and then seeing the assemble edit and going, oh, this is terrible, you know, and then having to kind of, and then having to fix it, you know.
There's a question here actually about your editing on set. Do you still do that, and will you still do that as you move on to larger productions, to edit as you go along? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it's Rebecca, I didn't edit myself. It's the first film I've not been involved in the editing, and John Amos did it, who's worked on Baby Driver and a lot of the Edgar stuff, and did 20,000 Days on Earth and all that. And I thought, I mean, John's really nice anyway, so when I met him, I knew I was going to get on with him. But I thought, well, am I going to be all right with this, you know, to relinquish this side of it? And it was very easy to be honest. After a while, I was like, fuck it, yeah, it's great. And he was on set cutting. And what ended up happening, which was really good, was that he'd cut Anita Christie, who's the script supervisor, and I would sit in a tent as we're shooting. And then the discussion would be me, John, and Anita about what we needed and what we were missing and what wasn't working. So we caught stuff that we would never have known, spatial stuff I never would have spotted on the day. And between John and Anita, they worked it out. And Anita's like basically the film police, you know, so she knows it inside and out. She goes, well, he's picked up this and he's dropped it over here and it's not fitting together. And he's got up and got down and got up, but in this take, So that was, I started to get like an insight into a way of working which is like really efficient, you know. And I'm definitely going to do that again.
Another question is, what are your top tips for working with actors?
Cast them well. That's the top tip. I think that
Yeah.
casting is super important, and a lot of the films I've done have been written for specific actors, so that shortcuts a lot of the on-set directing to actors that you might have to do because you know that they're going to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then a kind of an analogy of directing, I always think is like if someone asks you directions, or you ask someone directions and they give you more than 4 directions of where to go, you can never remember what the fuck they said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true of talking to actors. If you go, it's this and my feeling and that and all this and do that and when you feel like this and then it's all white noise. They'll catch the first bit of it, but the rest of it is just you chatting. So I think it's being super specific, but mainly you're just trusting the actors, I think, a lot of the time, and then just slowly, gently guiding them, and not, I mean, I saw a documentary on Haneke, and he was like, because he's like when he's not directing, he's like an acting tutor or something, and he like puppets them and mimics what their performances is. He does it for the kids, does it for the women, does their voices and all this shit. And I was looking at it, wow, that's obviously works for him, but that's a really extreme other end of the spectrum of what you can do. For me, I just often with blocking, I just try and you just make it feel as natural as it can in the room, and then you film it and you react to it rather than trying to force them into shapes that will then work for the camera. So and their natural instincts as humans are probably what you want to capture rather than what your predetermined ideas of how you want to move them around the room.
Another question is, how did you first approach getting distribution early on in your career?
We made a film and then we took it to film festivals, and then we were lucky enough to win at some of the film festivals, and then we went to some distribute in the UK. It was in America. I think we got contacted by the distributors were at the festival we were at. So they just talked to us straight away and went, oh, we want to distribute that. And we're like, excellent. And then in the UK, we talked to a couple of people, but it was, yeah, and that was, but those days are, any advice I would give on this is all done, because those days are over. All the UK company we were with went bust, and the way that they did it, which was like they give you an minimum guarantee, which is like they'll buy the film off you for, I think on Down Terrace it was 20 grand or something like that. But Down Terrace only went into profit this year. Wow. So 10 years. So that's how successful we were. But they made loads of money. Good for them, the distributors, but we didn't make anything. So we took that the 20 we got as the minimum guarantee, paid all the deferred payments on the crew. So the film was out, in terms of everyone got paid, except for me and Andy and Rob, who put the money in. So we didn't get any of that back. But then 10 years later, I think I got my investment back the other day, finally.
Wow. I mean, worth keeping in mind for anyone.
Well, you're not going to make, no one gets rich off this stuff, is for sure. No, if you're hoping, and if you've got any kind of urgency to get money back, it's just mad. It just doesn't happen. So, yeah.
There's a question here about music. Do you think about music for the film when you're writing the script or at a later stage? And how have you decided which composer to collaborate with on your films?
It depends on the film, and sometimes I'll often make a playlist on Spotify. If you go to the Invader website, they've got one of the did some playlists for them, which are from movies that never got made. So there's you can anyway. But so that I find useful, and I listen to that if I'm writing the script, I'll listen to that playlist, and sometimes the playlist will make it all the way into the movie. In terms of the composers, I've only worked with 2, and so Jim Williams, who did all the movies up until Field in England, and then Clint Mansell, who did all the Oh no, God, sorry, Jeff, and Jeff Barrow and Ben Salisbury did Free Fire. So I think they're quite organic usually. That how you choose people. It's like casting, and it's kind of you've got to like the music, but also you got to like the person. And then I kind of generally think of the project with the person in mind. So, for instance, the Free Fire, why we ended up working with Jeff and Ben was because I'd worked with Jeff on High Rise doing the Portishead track on High Rise, and then I'd become friends with him basically and kept chatting, and then it just seemed like a natural thing, and he'd just done Ex Machina at that point as well. So, and then Clint I'd kind of started chatting to through Twitter, I think, at the time. And we'd had just a general chat, and we got on really well, and so it kind of, I felt like it made sense. So yeah.
And another question here, can you talk a little bit about your time on Doctor Who and the differences between directing for film and for TV?
Yeah, I mean, obviously on Doctor Who, it's not just a TV program, it's a 50-year-old TV program, so there's a lot of continuity and history of it. So I wasn't ever going to be going in and going, right, tear up the rule book, I'm going to do something completely different. Also, I was a fan of the show, so I wanted to go in and make a Doctor Who episode, not make a Ben Wheatley mad thing, different thing, you know. So so that was it. I mean, on set it was very easy going, you know. I didn't ever feel like the dread hand of BBC Overwatch, or like a hand on my shoulder watching over the monitors. I kind of got on with what I wanted to do, and a lot of Doctor Who really is about making the days, you know, because it is a low budget show really at the end of the day, and it's a complicated show, and it's different. The main problem they've got is that it's a different show every episode, so there's no, you know, you're not like Star Trek where you just reuse the Enterprise again and again. Oh, actually that's a lie because it's the TARDIS, but the other sets, you know, you don't get to reuse them again and again. So yeah, that was fine. And then, like I was saying before, there's no going through the script and pulling a page out and going, well, that's bollocks, which I can do on my own stuff. So I have to go to Moffat. Is that all right? And he's like, yes. I'm like, okay, we'll see then. So that's a difference, you know, but you respect that because that's what you bought into, and that's what literally this power structure of a television show is: producers and writers, and often writer producers. So you're like, that's it, you know.
Another question here, a couple of questions actually about writing. So your process for writing a first draft sounds super quick. Has it always been that way for you, or does that come with more experience?
It's always been like that, yeah. I've always been, but I stress that I can write fast, but can I write well? No. So, and it's often about kind of, it's easier to edit scripts than it is to write them. So my lack of nuance in the original draft, that's a skill in itself, not to care, you know, and just to bash through it until you've got something, and then you can read it and go, oh, it's awful, but I know why, rather than if you just continually write the first page again and again until it's perfect, you end up not writing a script, you know, and you're 10 years down the line, and then you've written your script about Baudelaire and go, here's my script about Baudelaire, and they go, new film with Brad Pitt about Baudelaire coming out this week. You go, fuck, why did I do that? You know, I've wasted all this time on my one idea, you know. And really you've got to spread bet on as many ideas as possible, because that's the power that you have, is your ideas, not just one idea, because chances are someone's had it, you know.
I mean, I almost feel like you've answered this, but I'm going to ask it because someone is asking, what advice would you give for someone that's hit a brick wall creatively for writing?
I don't know. Have a rest. Well, I don't know. What do you say to that? It's like, why would your soul be sad at that point? You're tired, aren't you? You've been trying too hard, and you probably need to think about something else. In my world, I would write a different script. But if you're really exhausted, find something else to do, like playing games or something, or drinking or something. You know, I think you need to come at it tangentially to get your brain off it and to learn to like it again. That's all, because it's mainly you just, I mean, I've got a real problem at the moment. I've got a weird like script narcolepsy where I start writing and I just fall asleep. I think it's like a protective thing of just like, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to do it. So I have to work out different ways of doing that, which is like quite a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
You know, and now I like, thanks to this Cummings thing, I'm like, I do a couple of lines of script and then I look at Twitter for a bit and see what's going on, and then I go backwards and forwards. And that seems to be the way of stopping me just looking at Twitter all the time, you know.
Uh-huh. That's an interesting method.
I wouldn't use it as take it as advice. It's completely destructive and stupid.
I mean, certainly gets you energized. And there's a question here that's a bit more general about the industry. How do you think COVID will change the future of film production in the UK? Do you think there'll be a move towards small scale productions like your Brilliant Down Terrace and Field in England, or will we all be making TV and streaming?
Well, it's all got the same problem, isn't it? I think that on a practical production level, I mean, I think you can work out ways of doing it for the crew, which you can keep away from people, but not for actors. That's a real disaster, you know, you can't. And I think that the way everything's going, unfortunately, is that in a few months' time, they won't give a shit about anything and they'll just do whatever they want. And I think that's the problem, that there won't be any, you know, that seems to be the way it's going. They'll just go, oh, it's better that the industries are working rather than having all these having loads of unemployed, and we'll just take the risk. And that's really horrifying, I think. But I think that's probably what's going to happen. I don't know. I mean, maybe there'll be an explosion of film production because they'll just throw a massive tax credit at it. So I know that's happened in Spain already. And so they'll just encourage it even more to happen, and there'll be more production here than ever. Or America will become protectionist on it and they'll put a massive tax credit over there to keep their production there rather than going out to Canada and to South Africa and to UK and Eastern Europe. So I don't know. I think the more interesting question is, what do movies look like post-COVID, and what are they about anymore? Because you've basically lost the genre, the zombie genre right there. It's gone. You can't make a zombie film now, really, because we've just lived through it. And like the pandemic movie or any of these things that are about, or even the alien invasion movie, is kind of just happened. You know, and these films are meant to be metaphors, but we've lived through the literal version of it, which isn't that entertaining. And I don't know if we'd ever want to watch a thing that feels like the thing we've just lived through in a way. But then, hey, there was plenty of Second World War movies, so you know.
I mean,
I don't know, maybe the other way.
Maybe in a few years we'll get another search.
Maybe so. I don't know. I mean, I just think about 3 or 4 weeks into this, I was looking at the VOD stuff that was on Prime and just going, these things feel like they're in the past, man. These movies don't feel like they're relevant to anything in this new reality that we've got. But maybe this new reality will just shut off really quick, which is what everyone wants. You know, the government wants.
I think we're pretty much out of time already. I'm sorry, there's too many questions for us to get through all of them, but thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions, and for Ben, and for everyone who stuck around for the full hour. And thank you, Ben, so much for sharing a lot of insight. And
hey, we've got more people at the end than we had at the start. That's not bad.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, they haven't run away.
Is there any parting note that you like to let the audience know, who I'm imagining are mostly aspiring filmmakers who are also
yes, make stuff. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't. And people, and basically the first people to not to trust are the people telling you how to do it, including me.
Excellent. That's such a great note to end on. Thank you so much. It's been genuinely a pleasure, and I look forward to both Rebecca and Tomb Raider 2. Thank you.
Cheers. Laters.